So, hello and welcome back to our final day with Beverly of Graustark by George Barr McCutcheon. And amazingly enough, I'm not in my wearable blanket because it has warmed all the way up to 12 degrees Fahrenheit, which, well, still cold, perhaps even very cold, is so much better than it's been for the last 3 days that it almost feels balmy. Okay, that's probably going too far. Unsurprisingly, to go with the warmer temperatures, we are having snow. I'll show it to you right now. Now, I'm not actually going to take you outside in it because it's cold. But like I said, 12 degrees is still so much warmer than zero. So I guess I'll take it. I mean, I guess I kind of have to take it. I don't control the weather, and therefore, you just got to take what you get. I am happy that it's not zero or in the negatives, although I think overnight temperatures are still supposed to be below zero. But you know what? It's winter. It's supposed to be below zero at night, especially in January and February, which is why I never loved January and February. But hopefully the incredible Arctic blast can go back up to the Arctic, you know? Like, just go hang out in the Arctic Circle and do your thing there. And yeah, this is our last night with George Barr McCutcheon, unless I manage to find more of his books, and if I do, I will definitely be the first to let you know. I am thinking that I'm going to do a live stream watching the movie that goes with this on Saturday, which is the 25th. There's also a poll up on my community page voting for the next public domain book that we will probably start on probably the next day, Sunday. What I'm thinking is we're going to watch the movie on Saturday, either at 9 or 10 p.m. my time, and then we'll probably start the next public domain book the next night, probably. Let me know what you guys think. It'll be a live stream, but at the same time, it'll be a video that you can watch. I'll probably put it with the playlist for this. And then I might do kind of, once we've watched the movie, I'll probably do a separate video with my thoughts on book versus movie, etc., and so on. But before we can do that, we have to see what the end of this book is. I mean, I would have thought that the last chapter would have been a good spot to end. After all, Paul Baldos and Beverly Calhoun have agreed to become man and wife. I mean, once he goes to Vienna and takes care of Colonel Marlanx, but I mean, that seems pretty cut and dried there, but we still have another chapter. And even better, it's a chapter with another painting. So I guess we're just going to jump back in and finish off Beverly of Graustark by George Barr McCutcheon with chapter 31, which is titled Clear Skies. The Duke of Matz and his associates reached Edelweiss in the afternoon. Their attendants and servants carried luggage bearing the princely crest of Dawsbergen, and it was meant for Prince Danton and his sister Candace. In the part of the castle set apart for the visitors, an important consultation was held behind closed doors. There, Danton met his countrymen and permitted them to renew the pledge of fealty that had been shattered by the overpowering influence of his mad half-brother. What took place at this secret meeting the outside world never knew. Only the happy result was made known. Prince Danton was to resume his reign over Dawsbergen as though it had never been interrupted. The castle, brilliant from bottom to top, filled with music and laughter, experienced a riot of happiness such as it had not known in years. The war clouds had lifted, the sunshine of contentment was breaking through the darkness, and there was rejoicing in the hearts of all. Bright and glorious were the colors that made up the harmony of peace. Men and women of high degree came to the historic old walls garbed in the riches of royalty and nobility. To Beverly Calhoun, it was the most enchanting sight she had ever looked upon. From the gallery, she gazed down into the halls glittering with the wealth of Graustark, and she was conscious of a strange feeling of glorification. She felt that she had a part in this jubilee. Along with Princess Candace, she descended the grand staircase and mingled with the resplendent crowd. She was the center of attention. Dressed in a simple, close-fitting gown of black velvet, without a single ornament, her white arms and shoulders gleaming in the soft light of the chandeliers, she was an enticing creature to be admired by men and women alike. The two stalwart Americans felt their hearts bound with pride as they saw the conquest their countrywoman was making. Princess Candace, her constant companion these days, was overcome with delight. "You are the prettiest thing in all this world," she whispered into Beverly's ear. "My brother says so too," she added conclusively. Beverly was too true of a woman not to revel in this subtle flattery. The great banquet hall was to be thrown open at midnight. There was dancing and singing during the hours leading up to this important event, and Beverly was entranced. She had seen brilliant affairs back home, but none of them compared to this regal splendor. It was the sensuous, overpowering splendor of the East. Prince Danton joined the throng just before midnight. He made his way direct to the little circle in which Beverly and Candace were the center. His full, rich military costume gave him a new distinction that quite overcame Beverly. They fell into an animated conversation, exchanging shafts of wit that greatly amused those who could understand the language. "You must remember," said Beverly in reply to one of Ravon's sallies, "that Americans are not in the least bit awed by Europe's greatness. It has come to pass when we call Europe our playground. We now go to Europe as we go to the circus or the country fair back home. It isn't much more trouble, you know, and we need to see the sights." "Alas, poor Europe," he laughed. As he strolled about with her and Candace, he pointed out certain men to her, asking her to tax her memory in her effort to recall their faces, if not their clothing. She readily recognized in the lean, tired faces the men that she had first met at the Inn of the Hawk and Raven. "They were vagabonds then, Miss Calhoun. Now they are noblemen. Does the transition startle you?" "Isn't Baldos among them?" she said, voicing a query that had been uppermost in her mind since the moment she had looked down out of the galleries and not seen him. She was wondering how he would look in a court costume. "You forget. Baldos is only a guard," he told her kindly. "He's still a courtier, nevertheless," she told him. Beverly was vaguely disappointed because he was missing from the scene of splendor. It proved to Beverly that caste overcame all else in the rock-ribbed East. The common man, no matter how valiant, had no place in the affairs like these. Her pride was suffering. She was as a queen among the noblest of the realm, but as the wife of Baldos, she would live in another world, on the outskirts of this world of splendor and arrogance. A stubborn, defiant little frown appeared on her brow as she pictured herself in her mind's eye, standing from afar with the man Baldos, looking at the opulence that she could not reach. Her impetuous, rebellious little heart was thumping bitterly as she considered this single phase of life to come. She was about to cry out against the injustice of all of it. The little frown was portentous of deep-laid designs. She was going to break down this cruel barrier that kept Baldos from the fields over which prejudice alone held sway. Her love and her determination to be his wife were not in the least bit dulled by these reflections. The doors to the great banquet hall were thrown open, finally, and in the disorder that followed, she wondered who was to take her to the feasting. The Duke of Mizrox had already claimed the Princess Candace. "I am to have the honor," said someone at her side, and the voice was the one she least expected to hear say the words. The speaker was the man who deserved the place next to Yetive, Prince Danton himself. Bewildered, her heart beating with various emotions, she took his arm and allowed herself to be drawn wonderingly through the massive doors. As they entered, followed along by the brilliant company, the superb orchestra that Beverly had so often enjoyed began playing the stirring song, "Hands Across the Sea." The musicians themselves seemed to have caught the universal feeling of joy and happiness in the air, and they played as if inspired, their leader bowing low to the young American girl as she went by. It was his affectionate tribute to her. Prince Danton, to Beverly's amazement, led her up the entire length of the banquet hall to the head of the royal table, gorgeous with the plate of 100 Graustark rulers, placing her on his left and next to the slightly raised royal chairs. Candace was on his right, the picture of happiness. Beverly felt weak and dizzy. She looked helplessly at Prince Danton. His smile was puzzling. As though in a daze, she saw Grenfall Lorry with the Countess Yvonne standing exactly opposite to her, he, along with the others, awaiting the appearance of the princess and the one who was to sit beside her. The music ceased, and a hush fell over the room. And then Yetive came forward, magnificent in her royal robes, smiling and happy. A tall man, in the uniform of an exalted army officer, stood beside her, gold braid and bejeweled things all across his breast. Beverly turned dead white. Her figure stiffened, and then she relaxed. It was Baldos. She never knew how she dropped into the chair that the servant held out for her. She only knew that his dark eyes were smiling with love and mischief in their depths directly to her. There was a vague, uncertain sound of chattering. Someone was speaking eagerly to her, but she didn't hear him. Then there was a standing toast to the Prince of Dawsbergen, and then the audacious ghost of Baldos was proposing a ringing response to the Princess Yetive. The orchestra kept playing both the Graustark and Dawsbergen national anthems, but it all seemed like a dream to Beverly. At last she heard Candace calling to her, her face wreathed in smiles. Eyes, scores of them, seemed to be looking at her, and all of them full of amusement. Now, that girl now, they say that a girl can't keep a secret. That came to her ears from the radiant sister of Danton. Ravone, next to her, spoke to her, and she turned to him dizzily. You first knew me as Ravone, Miss Calhoun, he was saying. Then it became necessary, by royal command, for me to be Prince Danton. May I have the honor of introducing myself in the proper person? I am Christowal of Rapthornburg, and I shall be no one else hereafter. The friendship that binds me to Prince Danton, at last in his proper place beside the Princess of Graustark, is to be strengthened into a dearer relationship before very many days have gone by. The Princess Candace will cease to be his sister, said the Duke of Mizrox. She is, and long has been, his affianced wife. Enchanted and confused over everything that had occurred in the last few minutes, Beverly murmured her heartfelt congratulations to the couple. The orchestra again had ceased playing, and all eyes turned to Baldos, who was actually the real Prince Danton, who, glass in hand, rose to his feet. Your Royal Highness, ladies and gentlemen, Graustark and Dawsbergen are entering a new era. I pledge you my honor that never again shall the slightest misunderstanding exist between us. Graustark and Dawsbergen shall go forth to their glorious destiny as one people. Your gracious ruler has seen fit to bestow her hand and affections upon an American gentleman, your esteemed Prince Consort. We all know how loyally the people approved her choice. There is one here, a trusted friend of your beautiful princess, and lovingly called in your hearts Beverly of Graustark, whose example more worthy for me to follow than that of the Princess Yetive? With whom could I better share my throne and please you more than with your beloved American protege? I ask you then, drink a toast to my betrothed, Beverly Calhoun, the future Princess of Dawsbergen. Every glass was raised, and the toast drunk amidst ringing cheers. The military band crashed out the air so dear to all Americans, especially Southern hearts, and Beverly was far too overcome to speak. You all? Was all she could exclaim. There was a tremendous commotion in the gallery. People stood on their seats, half frightened and half amused, their attention attracted by the unusual scene below. A portly woman, totally unconscious of the sensation that she was causing, her feet keeping time to the music, was frantically waving a red and yellow bandana handkerchief. It was Aunt Fanny. And in a voice that could be heard over everyone in the banquet, she shouted, "Good Lord, honey, if they're not playing Away Down South in Dixie! Hooray!" Hours later, Beverly was running, confused and humbled, through the halls to her room when a swifter one than she came up and stopped her flight. "Beverly," came an eager voice. She slowed and looked over her shoulder. The smiling, triumphant face of Baldos met her eyes. The upper hall was almost clear of people. Beverly was strangely frightened and distressingly diffident. Her door was not far away, and she would have reached it in an instant had he not laid a restraining hand upon her arm. Then she turned to him, her lips parted in protest. "Don't look at me that way," he told her. "Come, dearest, come with me. We can be alone in the nook at the end of the hall. Heavens, I'm the happiest being in all the world. Everything turned out as I prayed it would." Beverly allowed him to lead her into the darkened nook. In her soul, she was wondering why her tongue was so powerless. There were 100 things that she wanted to say to him, but Now that the moment had come, she was voiceless. She could only look helplessly at him. Joy seemed to be paralyzed within her, as though she were asleep and could not be awakened. As they sank upon the cushion, she dropped to his knee before, or he, no, she dropped to his knee before her, his hand clasping hers with a fervor that thrilled her. Then he spoke, and her pulses quickened, and her blood began to race furiously. I have won your love, Beverly, by the fairest of means. There has never been an hour which I have not been struggling for this end. You gave yourself to me when you knew that I could be nothing more than a humble soldier. It was the sacrifice of love. You will forgive my presumption, my insolence, my dear, when I tell you that my soul is the forfeit I pay. It will be yours through all eternity. I love you. I can give you the riches of the world as well as the wealth of the heart. The vagabond Baldos dies. Your poor, humble follower gives way to the supplicating prince. You would have lived in a cot as a guardsman's wife, but you will take the royal palace instead, I'm sure. Beverly came to herself again. The spell seemed to be gone. Her eyes swam with happiness and love. The suffering that her pride had sustained was swept into a heap labeled romance, and then she was rejoicing. I hated you tonight, I thought, she cried, taking his face in her hands. It looked as though you had played a trick on me. That was mean, dear. I couldn't help thinking that you had used me as a plaything, and it made me furious. But it is different now. I see so plainly. And just as I had resigned myself to the thought of spending the rest of my life in a cottage, away outside the pale of this glorious life. Oh, this is just like a fairy tale. But it was not altogether a trick, my dear. There was no assurance I could regain the throne, not till the very end. And without it, I would have been a beggar instead of a prince, and we would have lived in a hovel after all. Fortune was with me. I deceived you for months, Beverly. My sweet Beverly, but it was for the best. In defense of my honor and dignity, however, I must tell you that the princess has known for many days that I am Danton. I told her the truth when Cristobal came that day with the news. It was all well enough for me to pass myself off as a vagabond, but it would have been unpardonable to foist Cristobal upon her as the prince. And she's known for a week, cried Beverly. The whole court is known. I alone was blind? As blind as a proverb. Thank God I won you as a vagabond. I can treasure your love as the richest of my princely possessions. But you have not said that you will go to my castle with me, my dear. Beverly leaned forward unsteadily, and he took her in his eager arms. Their lips met, and their eyes closed in an ecstasy of bliss. After a long time, she lifted her eyelids, and her gray eyes looked solemnly into his dark ones. I have much to ask you about, and many explanations to demand, sir, she told him. By the rose that shields my heart, you shall have the truth, he told her. I am still your servant. My enlistment to you is endless. I will always serve your highness. Your highness, she murmured, lost in thought. Then a smile of realization broke over her face. Isn't it wonderful? Do you think that your brothers will let me come to Washington now? He asked her teasingly. It does seem different, doesn't it? She murmured, and then a strange little smile crossed her face. You will come to me, though, won't you? to the ends of the earth, Your Highness. And that is the end. And as promised, we do have one more picture to look at. And the picture is the "I hated you tonight, I thought," she cried. There it is. Is it on the screen? There it is. I do love these pictures because to me they look like the ultimate of Gibson girl paintings. And I don't know, I need to look it up, and maybe I'll remember to do that, if the illustrator of this is actually the one who does the famous Gibson girl pictures. Harrison Fisher. I'll have to look that up. Also, thanks to Georgia, I now know that this is part of far more than just a trilogy. It looks like there's 5 or 6 Graustark books, which is kind of insane. I wonder if they're all similar. All in all, I really enjoyed this book. It was just a fun little romp. As I pointed out so many times before, it definitely felt like a soap opera, and that kind of made me smile. But as I'm pretty sure Georgia pointed out in one of the comments, I don't remember what chapter it was in, but I think Georgia has said that she's read all of these, and they do get a little bit formulaic, which, to be fair, also is very similar to a soap opera. But, I mean, all in all, I really enjoyed this. The only part, and I've talked about it before, that I didn't like is, of course, Aunt Fanny and her portrayal. And that's mostly a product of its time. But overlooking that, I definitely enjoyed our romp through the fictitious kingdom of Graustark. And I will be keeping an eye out whenever I go to the resale shops and the used bookstores to see if I maybe stumble across any more of these. I do have a couple more just books that I never heard of that should be in the public domain because they're very old. And after we go through and read another classic by either Dickens or Jules Verne, then our next book will come from those offerings of the lesser known, which could be good and it could be awful. You never know. That's kind of exciting though. But that is where I am going to leave you. Thank you as always. I hope that you enjoyed this book as much as I did. Please do join me. Keep an eye on my community tab. I'll let you guys know by Friday what time I'm going to do the live stream of Beverly of Graustark, the movie. It'll be on Saturday. It'll probably be either at 9 or 10 p.m. I'll let you know for sure what time, probably by Friday. If you have a time that would work best for you, let me know. Keeping in mind that I am in North America on Eastern time, so I don't know how that actually ends up lining up with everybody else's time. I can barely keep track of the time zones in North America. When it gets beyond that, I do get very, very, confused. But thank you for listening. I hope that you enjoyed Beverly of Graustark. Leave me a thumbs up if you don't mind. It does always make me smile. And I will see you, hopefully, on Saturday when we watch the movie.